afternoon everybody, and welcome to a rather wet and dreary winter afternoon in New Zealand. My name's Mithras and I'm one of the people that are involved in the RuneQuest project, a small collective of gamers from a long time ago who've been inspired and enthused by the latest version of RuneQuest, RuneQuest Glorantha, decided to get together and record not only some adventures and campaigns that we are currently undertaking, but also thoughts and reflections on the nature of RuneQuest and Glorantha. And not only in terms of the mechanics of the game, the difference between RuneQuest 2, RuneQuest 3 and RuneQuest Glorantha for instance, but also too reflections and thoughts about the nature of the world of Glorantha itself, as well as, how can we put this, the change in the very concept of Glorantha and the wider mythological world in which RuneQuest is set, and how that's changed over the years, in fact over the decades really, and how the latest iteration of Glorantha has altered from old RuneQuest 2 days or RuneQuest 3 days. So, what can I say about us? So the RuneQuest project is a group of RuneQuest players that have coalesced around Ox, or Glenn, and one of his friends, Neil. And they've been kind enough to ask me to be part of it as well. And the idea behind the RuneQuest project is in part to record games that we've been playing, and we've been playing over Discord and Roll20, exploring this new internet medium, and also looking at commentaries on not only those games themselves, but also the rule set, the world of Glorantha, and so on. And so here we are. And what I'd like to talk about today is my character in a newly created campaign. We've recorded all our campaigns, so I will include a link to those. But we've just started a new campaign, and it is kicked off at Apple Lane, and we have just completed the classic defence of Gringle's Pawn Shop. It's an interesting party we've got. There's, I think, 4 Sartorites of various types, but we also have a Minotaur and a Troll. Now, that in itself is a little bit unusual and interesting maybe, especially since the Minotaur is a Shalana Arroy healer, and I'm playing the Troll, Mr. Grip, who is a Shaman. Now, I've got to say, if you ever want to break your RuneQuest game, your RuneQuest Glorantha game, play a Shaman. And if you really, really want to break it well, play a Troll Shaman. They are ridiculously OP, and really, I think, cry out for a revision in a second edition of the RuneQuest rules, getting them toned down and making them, I think, just a little less grossly powerful. But I will go into my thoughts on Shamans in the RuneQuest Glorantha rule set another time. But what I really want to talk about is what it is to be a troll, and ideas and thoughts that came out of rolling up and my first plays with Mr. Grip, and trying to figure out who this person is. Needless to say, I'm not one of those role players who play games in order to fulfill combat fantasies. I enjoy the engagement with an alternative reality, another way of looking at the world. And so playing a non-human, particularly in a Gloranthan environment where they are not simply humans caricatured in various different ways. They are fully organic individuals that come out of a developed and complex society, and it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about trolls or dragon newts or elves or dwarves or what have you. There is an entire environment around these creatures, and to play them just as a cartoon variant of the human thug or the human sort of lithe archer or something like that really doesn't give us it doesn't do the world merit. And certainly I don't find that approach to be particularly intellectually stimulating. So I roll up a troll, and who is this individual? Now, how I'm sort of playing him, well, let's have a look at, where to start. He's a shaman. Now, troll society is, troll religion essentially is ancestor worship writ large. Kaiga Litor is really the matriarch, the ancestress of all trolls. And so by worshipping Kaiga Litor, trolls are worshipping the great ancestor. And so while the trolls do have priestesses of Kaiga Litor and all the other troll deities, there is something special about the role of shamans as the intermediary and between the ancestors and the current people. And so trolls, I see shamans in general, but let's just stick with troll shamans in particular. They occupy this unusual place in society. They represent religious and spiritual power and authority, but outside the formal structures of priesthood. Now, when we talk about priests and priesthood, automatically we're talking about temples. And when you're talking about temples, you're talking about structures and congregations and hierarchies and so forth. And so to become a priest, you become enmeshed in this hierarchical, culture-centered, culture-orientated environment. And so as we see throughout world history, and this is also the same in Gloranthan history, the relationship between priesthood and politics is a very, very strong relationship, and it's an institutional relationship. When we're looking at shamans, we're looking at something that's a little bit outside. Shamans represent a direct personal interaction with spirituality, a direct personal interaction with the ancestors, without the mediation of a priest who interprets, to greater or lesser extents, interprets the word of the deity or the ancestors. Within shamanism and shamanic culture within Glorantha, here is an opportunity for the individual literally to have a conversation with one of the ancestors, one of the great spirits. And so that gives them an unusual sort of power, a very personal power, rather than a corporate power. And so within troll society, which is again a very, very power-orientated structure, troll hierarchy is, when it comes down to it, based on violence. And it's either the violence you can personally mete out to someone else, or it's the violence you, your underlings, and your allies can mete out to someone else. It's if you're the toughest guy on the block, you are the king of the block. Shamans, to a certain extent, subvert that. And so, and by allowing the individual troll to have an individual conversation with an individual ancestor, it gives the potential for conversations to step outside the hierarchy of normal trollish society. So getting back to Mr. Grip, my troll shaman, I see him as an individual who is used to being treated with respect, a lot of respect. And that respect is in part born out of sheer power. I mean, you don't piss off a shaman, because what do? They come in one night and just possess you, and you find yourself jumping off cliffs. So they have a lot of personal power. Now, in the game itself, I've played it that the reason that this shaman, this integral part of trollish community, has left his community and gone to Sarta, gone to human lands in order to adventure, quite simply comes down to the fact that he was given a message by an ancestor to go to Sarta and observe the beginning of the Hero Wars. And like a good shaman, he does what he's told by if an ancestor tells him. And I'm role-playing this. He doesn't actually want to go. He doesn't like it. He likes his place within Trollish society. He has spent many, many years earning his shamanhood. And just as he's got it, um, he loses basically a lot of the social privileges and cachet of being a shaman. He is removed from troll society, the society which he has his place, and he has his power, he has his authority, he has his mana, and going off to a bunch of people who really don't give too much of a damn as to who he is, and certainly doesn't treat him with respect, or the respect that he feels he deserves. So he's off out in human society, rocking around the place with a bit of a chip on the shoulder because, quite simply, he's not respected. Or at least not respected in a way that he appreciates. So that makes him surly, antagonistic, not very communicative, and in a lot of ways actually confirming a lot of the human prejudices and stereotypes about trolls. Now, one of the other things that he plays, or is how I'm playing him, is that because he has come from this role in society where there's a lot of pride and a lot of prestige, there are a lot of things that are beneath him. There's things that he just will not deign to do. And one of those is dealing with money. He refuses to be paid for any jobs because, well, that would make him a servant. You pay people to do things, they become your servant, and that is so far beneath his dignity that he gets offended if someone offers to pay him to do things. And so how do we work around that? And I quite simply play it that whilst he will not be paid, part of trollish society, or part of civilized society, is that if I do something for you, if I give you a gift, then you will give me a gift back. If I do you a favour, you will give me a favour back. And so if he will not, for instance, if someone says, right, here's 50 lunas, give me, cast a healing 6 on me, he will refuse that. That's an absolute no-no. But he will cast a healing 6 and quietly expect that the person he's cast his healing on will in turn give him something back, gift him something back. And of course he won't actually discuss the nature of it or whether the gift is appropriate, because that would be haggling, wouldn't it? And haggling is commerce, and commerce is becoming someone's servant. So we haven't really got into many situations where this comes to the fore, but it's something I'm looking forward to playing through a bit later on, especially in terms of player characters. There are some players who do things like play a healer and then get paid. I know this because I introduced my sons to RuneQuest, and one of them in particular likes doing that. So, yep, so no payment, but if you don't reply with a gift, he's going to get a little bit pissed off pretty quick. Now, so that's one aspect. So he's a troll out of place and out of time. He's resentful, grumpy, upset, alienated, sick of being treated like a pariah, especially when he knows that if he returns home, he will return home and find his very secure place in society in which he is respected and feared. And actually that notion of fear is quite interesting as well, because as he's rolling through Sata, of course he's feared. He's size 24. He's strength 20. He's a big troll. He's big and he's ugly, and I've played him like trolls, I think, are meant to be played. So very resilient, very strong, very staunch individuals that like to eat, and they really don't care what they can eat. because they can eat everything. And so you have this ugly, grumpy individual who will, and is about to eat a couple of foes they've just felled. Um, so, yeah, big, huge, ugly, violent, because he is violent, eats anything, so is more than happy to break any number of Sartrite taboos around what you eat and what you don't eat. So he is feared. You can expect that he will be feared. But there's that kind of fear. The fear engendered by a marauding band of thugs. But the fear that Mr. Grip is used to is the fear of, how can I put this? How about I give an analogy? It is like you're like the directing staff during basic training, the drill sergeants on boot camp for the American expression. So you join the services, you join the army, you go along, you do your basic training, and you spend a lot of time getting shouted at, a lot of time getting beasted, your room's getting tossed, all this sort of stuff. Now, you get to hold your directing staff, your drill sergeants, in a degree of fear, but also at the end of it there is some degree of acknowledgement of the fact that they are operating within rules. Now, they may be making your life a misery, but there are rules. There is a limit to what they can and can't do, and taken charitably, they're doing what they're doing for the best interests of not only the service that you have volunteered to join, but also ultimately the best interest in yourself. Just because medicine is good doesn't mean that medicine is tasty. So you have these two different types of fear. The fear of the thugs and the marauding brands and brigands and so forth. And then you have fear of those people who are operating within laws and so forth that are culturally condoned but are extreme. And it's that sort of second type of fear that Mr. Grip is more used to dealing with. So, now the other thing that I've been really intrigued about in terms of how to play a troll, particularly in relation to RQG and the way that they've now presented the runes, is how do I understand a troll's understanding of the man rune. Now, Mr. Grip has got his man rune of 90%, so he is someone that identifies very, very strongly with the man rune. The trolls are, of course, the dark men. They are the first men, the first owners of the man rune. So there is some sort of primal connection with them, as well as with darkness. And I think that incidentally, I think has been a little bit overlooked in the current descriptions of trolls. But nonetheless, if you look at the runes associated with Kaiga Litor, there it is, the man rune. So how does a troll understand the man rune, and how do I, as a player, play out the man rune in a trollish character? So, yeah, how does it work? And I'm still pondering this through. And so what is a man rune? So a man rune, someone that's strong in the man rune is someone that strongly identifies with their humanity, taking it in a wide context, because this is Glorantha after all. So they are aware that they are fundamentally human. They occupy the man conceptual realm. Now, if we sort of think about what is it to associate with being human at 90%, how do we conceptualize that? And so one of the things that I sort of think about as a human thinking about the man rune is that we would look to values around civilization and civilized behavior, not necessarily in terms of literacy and that sort of thing, but what makes for a good society. And if we're looking at real world analogues to this, I mean, I do sort of think a lot about 14th century concepts around chivalry. And so you have this idea about the knight who's out, the classic law of chivalry is fear God, obey the king, protect the weak. And so that would be, certainly protect the weak would be very much an expression of the man rune. And ideas around courtly love, around the role of music and the troubadours, around poetry, around those finer arts has been an absolutely critical and integral part of what the man rune is about. In a more modern context, I would also say that the man rune would be, if you have a high man rune, you would have a high degree of empathy. And, empathy comes much later. Empathy really is an evolution, a human psychological and emotional evolution that really only comes into the 20th century with some, with its roots in the 19th century. So the idea of empathy, though it's very modern, is also part of it. You don't hurt another sentient being because, well, it's another sentient being. You can identify with them in some way, shape or form. And you can put yourself in their place. And so if that is an understanding of the man rune, so it is the idea of civilized behavior, it is the idea of empathy, it is the idea of what it is that separates a human being from the animals, or indeed from nature, red in tooth and claw. How does that translate to a troll? Because you look at trollish society, it is violent, as I've already sort of discussed in some ways. They, compared to just about any other human society, trolls live in absolute squalor and filth. They don't see it, but they do cannibalise. Well, actually, no, they do. Karg's son must eat one of their relatives a season. So they're cannibalising, violent, so forth and so on. So how does a troll understand man rune? And if I am going to be shaped and controlled and directed, my character is going to be shaped, controlled and directed by his 90% in man rune, how is that actually going to play out? How does that express as for a troll? And I'm a little bit stumped about this one at this point in time. So in part I'm playing his expression of the man rune is in terms of pride and his awareness of his place in trollish society and his dislocation in human society. But there's got to be more to it than that. So yeah, perhaps watch this space as I try and figure out what a man rune means to a troll. So I'm just going to leave it there for the time being, and I look forward to any comments or so forth down below. And I certainly look forward to more conversations and discussions, and we'll be bringing in some of the other players and games masters in the RuneQuest project to have more than just one person talking at you. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and please comment.